Hello everybody, Lucy Edwards is here and welcome to Get Real with Lucy. The content was created when I was with VHT and Metaport, but it belongs to me and now it's on my channel, so please enjoy and please make sure to like it and comment. Cheers! Hi, I'm Lucy Edwards and today I'm here with Alan Dalton in Alan's beautiful Connecticut home. And today we are going to dive into so many very important, close to heart issues and subjects that our real estate professionals are going through right now. So welcome to this great conversation. Hi, Alan.
Great to be with you, and thank you for making this trip to interview me. It's an honor and a privilege.
Alan, you are a consultant now, and you are a legendary figure in the real estate industry. You revolutionized and actually turned everything around, how agents are thinking in today's environment and how they treat marketing strategy and education and technology. And actually, I would love to read something that was announced and said by Inman. Dalton's reputation in the industry has been built on his marvelous marketing skills. He's been described as a mesmerizing speaker on the subject of marketing and as a creative genius in designing marketing programs for realtors. That is amazing. And Inman, coming from Inman, in my opinion, it's a very prestigious organization, so it's a great, great compliment. But that's not all. So here we have another comment from Whole Store CEO Mike Long. So Mike is saying Dalton is best positioned to refocus Realtor.com as a website that should attract every realtor in the country to its services. What Alan does effectively is relate fairly complex products and services, both marketing and technology, to the realtor on the street who spends every day acquiring listings and selling homes. I think that is beautifully said, and it's just so about you. And you are a former CEO of Realtor.com. How did you decide to choose that path? How you were chosen? And let's just spend a few minutes on your Realtor.com journey.
Well, first of all, welcome to our home here in Connecticut. It's great to see you, Lucy, as always. You do a fantastic job for Matterport, which does a fantastic job for the industry. And I think that to make this interview, if you will, as useful for the audience as possible, I think it would be helpful if I share with them what I did to get to the point of being CEO of Realtor.com and what I've done since, only if it can help them. And the way I like to frame it is this. Everything I've done in the industry comes under the auspices of something I once read in the Harvard Business Review. And in the Harvard Business Review, the dean of the Harvard Business School suggested that every single person in business must compete in two ways, okay? They must, first of all, compete by asking themselves, what do I do that my competition also does, but that I do better? And also, what do I do that none of my competitors do? So everything mentioned in those introductions from Inman and Riz Media, and everything I've done in my career is basically capitulates to those concepts. I first and foremost ask myself, is this a program, a system, or a service that will help my company and my agents or industry agents do things better than their competitors? And moreover, is this something that the industry's never done before? And I know you put together, you visited my office and you grabbed some of these materials. I think we can validate, because I've never been a person who's big on theory. I like results. I like things that actually happened. And I'm very happy to substantiate the fact that I truly believe. I remember once Golda Meir said, don't be so humble, you're not that great. So I'm not going to be humble, and I'm going to tell it like it is. I think and I know that I've done things that the industry never thought of before, and I want to validate and substantiate it with some of these programs we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and exactly. Actually, you are well known in the industry as futurist. So that is a new word that was created just for you because you can see the future and you have the vision. And also, you don't always go along with the industry. You go against it because you can see the results if you were to take your own path. And as a matter of fact, one of the documents that I would like to talk about today is the real estate financial planning system. So you have a lot of planning systems with your money, with your banking account, with your life insurance, but you have it for real estate. And you're, actually, it's the only one that I'm aware of. It says the unique systems which integrates real estate.
First of all, in terms of doing things that the industry has never thought of, in 1989, I asked myself this question. Actually, it started in 1987. In 1987, we had a tremendous turndown in real estate values across the country, and particularly here in the Northeast. People just weren't going to buy anymore. In fact, ironically, in a buyer's market is when people don't buy. Homes that used to be $2 million were now $1 million. Homes that were $1.5 million were $900,000. So you'd think somebody would say, geez, let me buy that home for $900,000. It used to be worth $1.5 million, but they don't buy if they think the home could drop further. Mm-hmm. And so I had created a lot of national marketing systems, but it didn't matter because people basically were out of the market. So I asked myself this question back then: what percentage of consumers in America at some time in their life, Lucy, I asked myself, have regretted not owning enough real estate? And I basically came to the conclusion, almost everybody. Yeah. That led me to the follow-up question. What percentage of real estate professionals have ever developed a real estate plan or a real estate planning relationship with their clients and consumers? And my answer was basically nothing. So before anybody in the industry either thought about it or did it, in late 1980s, I created the Real Estate Financial Planning System. It's a self-help guide. People could discover their real estate personality, what percentage of their net worth was because of real estate. That's a question a financial planner would never ask because they skew against real estate, okay? How to go from renting to buying, how to move up, how to downsize, how to invest in real estate. But it was a self-help guide because I believed back then that rather than a top agent sending somebody a calendar or a refrigerator magnet, back then a pumpkin, that it would be much more relevant and meaningful and upgrading if they'd send this. Now, this has since been digitized, and I've brought this concept into a number of real estate organizations. So this is one example that basically reinforces that positioning of the dean. What am I doing that other companies aren't doing? Mm-hmm. And since no one was doing this, this was very successful, helped our company grow from one office to 60 offices. And then I created materials. Let me be a real estate professional for life. I would like to help you develop real estate goals and a real estate plan for life. And I have just a system, and my agents could put their picture on it. They could put it in their coat pocket or their carrying bag or whatever it was. Then I had real estate financial planning materials, how to do seminars, how to do letters. For example, dear homeowner, rather than send you a newsletter, bring you a pumpkin, a calendar, or a refrigerator magnet with my name on it. So when you think of buying or selling real estate, you will think of me. I would rather give you something more lasting and much more valuable. The real estate financial planning system. So there was all types of camera-ready ads and direct mail letters. And so this is just one example. And by the way, I think today this is more relevant than ever before because when I introduced this 30 years ago, I first introduced that the real estate industry should not be using the term past clients. Because I used to hear 30 years ago agents saying, I've got to do a better job of keeping in touch with my past clients, which means that you're the past agent. But the only way they can be a client for your entire career is to involve them in a mutual process. And that mutual process, just like a financial planner, and that was the premise. So this is one example. So when I say why I ended up with Realtor.com, whatever success I've had, it's all because of innovation in a way that I think the mainstream industry completely overlooks. So that's idea number one here.
And I would like to add to what you just had to say. In today's real estate landscape, you have to bring value to your clients, to your buyers, to your sellers. You have to bring, and actually your guide is perfect for both, Alan. It's good for buyers and it's good for sellers. They have to have that financial guide for themselves. So that is the value proposition that is on the table automatically. And I think it's incredible that you came up with something like that, and it's still valid.
Well, it's more valuable than ever. And I'll give you another reason, because what's going to happen since the changes in buyer agent compensation is that you're going to have more buyers who think they should go directly to the listing agent. okay, because they think they're going to save the compensation by doing so. That's all the more reason that realtors have to create relationships before a transactional need, and yet they have to have a program and a bridge they have to memorialize, because what's happened is that the industry has defined client by transaction. During a transaction, somebody's a client. After the transaction, they're a past client, which means before the transaction, at best, they can be a future client. No, people can become clients from the first time you meet them, but you have to explain to them how you're going to work. There has to be a meaningful program. I can't say to you, Lucy, I'd love to be your financial planner, but I just don't do any financial planning, but it sounds good, okay?
Right.
And it's not just, I own the URL, Real Estate Trusted Advisor. It's not enough just to say, I'm a Real Estate Trusted Advisor. You've got to be able to show people that you have content and a process and a life cycle methodology. That's now digital, and I have a number of companies that are using that.
That is absolutely fabulous. And actually, that is one of the companies that you were working with. It's Murphy Realty, Better Homes and Gardens. And I can see how you have it in different languages. So that was very creative. And especially in today's environment as well, you have international buyers and sellers coming from all over the world, and you are accommodating them in their language that it's easy for them to understand what the process is, because it's not like you are advertising just the property. You are advertising the strategy.
Well, Lucy, our interview today has to be more about the present and the future. But I'll go past again just to give a sense of a mindset, because I want everybody to have a mindset. What are you doing that no one else is doing, okay? And 35 years ago, we were the only real estate company, to my knowledge, in the world that did homes guides in 5 different languages. This one here is in Korean. Pretty impressive for 35, 40 years ago. Now, I know now with Google Translate and people will advertise 55 languages spoken, that's very easy to do. But to take the time, 35 and 40 years ago, to convert every single one of our listings into Korean, into Chinese, into Japanese, into Russian, into Spanish, from English, okay? That gave us a competitive edge that no one had. No one else could say to the home seller, we'd like to promote your property in multiple languages. Because, for example, Lucy, if you were relocating to China and all the other real estate companies only advertised in Chinese, but there was a company that also advertised in English, which company do you think you'd call? See, folks, that's exactly why we do homes guides in 6 different languages. And that also helped us. I'll talk about this later. We got a development with 10,000 condominiums because of this one idea. Ideas matter. And these are the ideas that the industry never did, and I did, and we did, okay? In fact, all of this was part of our home marketing system, okay? It was part of our home marketing system. I see you have that in the pile. About 35 years ago, when I first moved from Boston, New Jersey, our great founder, Joe Murphy, we had 1 or 2 offices. Joe was a luxury builder and a great broker, but he put his focus more on investing and building homes. But at the same time, a company called Weichert had over 125 offices just in that state. A company called Schlott, S-C-H-L-O-T-T, they had 100 offices. When we had 2, how could we compete against these monolithic octopuses? What I did is I created this ad 35 years ago. I had Joe in the middle. No company alone sells more than 10%. Now, this is shabby, so forgive the appearance. No company alone sells more than 10% of New Jersey real estate. Because back then, there wasn't a homeowner in New Jersey who wasn't aware of Weichert. Maybe they thought they did every home, 50%, 60%. So then I put all of their signs in the ad 35, 40 years ago, and they all were advertising they were number one in the market, number 1 in service, number 1 in this, number 1 in the country, because I wanted to manifest the folly and the absurdity. How can all these companies all say they're number 1? But since no company sells more than 10%, that's why we created a marketing system that all these other companies are part of. Now, why was this out of the box thinking, as people say? Because back then, almost everybody was still using this term, listing presentation. They had listing presentations, and agents had my marketing plan, but companies didn't have a defined, productized offering. So I created the Murphy marketing system, which then this became the Century 21, as you can see, co-created by Alan Dalton.
Right.
When I go to heaven, I'll meet my co-creator of this. But it was the Century 21 customized marketing system. I introduced that at the convention. Now, how was I didn't work for Century 21.
I was going to ask you, did you work for Century 21?
No, how did that happen? I didn't work for Century 21 because nothing can stop a great idea. Because unless somebody had a better idea, even politics can't keep great ideas. And it made sense for a company, instead of having 100,000 agents having 100,000 different ideas on how to market a home. Didn't it make sense for Century 21 to have a Century 21 customized? So I created that and got credit for that. Then I went to Coldwell Banker.
But with Coldwell Banker, you worked with Coldwell Banker and NRT together on that.
Yes. But I created the Coldwell Banker full service marketing system, and it was all on the same basis of here's what everybody else is doing, but then here's what we do. Then I don't know if we have the Better Homes and Gardens, and then I created that's another one. I created 3 national marketing systems, but I created a customized for them where every single thing that the agent would do was a yes or no. So it would ask the home seller on the form, would you like to have this, yes or no? Because it was interactive. But again, it was the Better Homes and Gardens home marketing system. The Better Homes and Gardens home marketing system. Then after I did that, I said, wait a minute. There's not just marketing. In business schools and in universities, there's marketing majors and merchandising majors. What's merchandising? It's not staging. Staging is what agents do to get the home ready. Merchandising, somebody could put in a new kitchen. Somebody could put in another bedroom. So I was the president of a Better Homes and Gardens company. Mm-hmm. And Better Homes and Gardens at that time was the 7th largest publishing company in the world. And they had the largest repository of home improvement content in the world. But no one had thought to link the real estate franchise to the publishing. I did. And I said, I'm not going to be modest today. I created the Better Homes and Gardens home merchandising system. You see here, Better Homes and Gardens and Alan Dalton is as if they were 2 brand names, which is a joke because I'm a nothing compared to them. But again, this is something the industry hadn't thought about. The industry only used the word staging. They didn't use the word merchandising because staging is a more transactional word and merchandising is a relational, because the average person is in the home now 10 to 12 years and they've got to be involved in whether they should move, improve it. So these are just some examples of how I thought independently, and I asked, what is the industry not doing? They're not doing merchandising. They're not doing planning. Okay?
And I would like to talk about, we're all familiar with the internet. This is outernet. So please explain, because it's not very clear to me.
Well, we're still going back in time here, and I want to go through this very quickly. But sure. In 1995, when the entire industry was talking about the internet, and we had an industry leader saying it's like the lion coming over the hill and Microsoft's going to disintermediate us. While everybody else at their company was figuring out how they were going to use the internet, I created the real estate outernet, okay? Because the outernet it says here, the outernet is the real estate service section off the internet, because I wanted to coach and inculcate all of my agents and other franchisees that the internet is just a part of our value. We can't have the internet transcend, subsume, and co-opt the total value of a real estate company, because back then people thought they were going to be put out of business. So I had to proportionalize the internet by having the internet just a small piece. It's the middle of the solar system, but we have to extol the solar system so homeowners can see all of our value. So I had 5 language buyers games, elegant homes division, real estate planning, move-up system, downsizing system, international marketing, our mortgage company, and so forth and so on. And so this is another example of what is the industry not doing that would give me an opportunity to help build our company from 1 to 60 offices, and then also have an impact on the national companies.
Well, that's not all. I would love to talk about the real estate renter to buyer flyer and advertising material that you have here, assistance program. That is very important because we talk about sale all the time, but rentals are future buyers and sellers.
Again, 30 or 40 years ago, I studied what was happening amongst the competition and within the industry. And basically everybody in the industry was talking about first-time buyers, okay? But I thought that was a misnomer because 95 to 99% of first-time buyers at that time in their life, they're actually renters. So I created the renter to buyer assistance program. This is not a flyer. This is a funded program. So we would go, for example, to developers and say, would you be willing to help with somebody's down payment? Because back then it was a extensive buyer's market. Would you buy down a point? Would you help them with monthly maintenance fees? Would you pay up to 3 months out of the lease? Then we would go to home sellers, and again, and this was a pronounced buyer's market, properties weren't selling, and we'd say to the home seller, where do you think the most likely buyer is coming from? Do you think they're downsizing, moving up, or a first-time buyer? Oh, they're a first-time buyer. Well, here's a program that we've created. Would you be willing to maybe pay 3 months out of a lease if that helps somebody buy this home? So in other words, this is being a solutionist. But the industry was just talking about the difference between renting and buying and how it's better to be a buyer than a renter. People had developed antibodies to that. People know that. But they needed financial assistance more than encouragement. And so this was very, very successful. We had seminars, we announced in the newspaper, ask about our rent-to-buyer assistance program. Right now, for my clients, we're creating the first-time buyer assistance program because all we're going to do is take programs from the state and federal government and put them into the brochure with links so then we can advertise, ask about our company's first-time buyer assistance program. But people in the industry don't think that way, okay? The government does, but they don't. And so this was very, very successful. And we secured so many developments during that period because of that.
Well, that's fantastic. Now we are next. Next is Neighbors Know Best. So that is also a program that I can see that you have a network agent can help. That is great. That is interactive. You can read, you can fill out, you can put your data there.
Well, I've created a lot of content for a lot of brands, and no brand that I have a greater relationship with than Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. And Gino Blafari, its chairman, encouraged me, as did Christy Budnick, the then CEO, to create content. And I worked in coordination with Wendy Duran, the fantastic marketing person, and I wrote the content for a lot of programs, as you can see here. Special thanks to Alan Dalton. So this is one that I've brought into a number of companies. Neighbors Know Best. Years ago, I had one of my agents who came to me and said, Alan, I can't get this property sold on Arch Street in Ramsey, right across from the railroad tracks. I said, here, take this yellow pad, Susan, go knock on all the doors and ask the homeowners who live there what they love about living there. Because she was new, she did it. She came back in a week in about 5 pages of testimonials. So I created Neighbors Know Best.
Oh, how creative.
I created Neighbors Know Best. When we sold the company, I kept the rights to this. I gave up my rights in the mortgage company to keep this in the planning guide. And the point is this. So this is rejection-free prospecting. This is where agents, if there's a postcard, they can send it back, that they can go to the neighbors and say, folks, we're representing a property down the street, and the best form of advertising in this age of ratings and reviews is that we can get testimonials from neighbors like yourself. Here, if you could just fill this out, you don't even have to put your name, it could really help us, and I think it will help all the values. Now, if somebody's not willing to knock on a door on that basis, they'll never knock on a door for anything because they're doing it on behalf of their clients and the shared interest in the community. So again, people were knocking on doors, but when I created this 30 years ago, no one had Neighbors Know Best. And this has been very successful. I'm very proud of this. And then I created downsizing, moving up, moving with children, moving with pets, why homes don't sell. So I coined the word years ago, consequences. Content carries consequences. And I encourage more people, and especially through Matterport, because Matterport, I suggested the name, you should be saying, auto Matterport instead of
Matterport.
auto/Matterport as opposed to automated, because you can automate the visual impressions and the value that realtors need on behalf of their home sellers. They have a sacred responsibility to basically help their homeowners, better compete with their properties. And so I've created all this content so when agents go to open houses, there's moving with pets. Because 71% of people have pets. I think they love their pets more than realtors. They're going to pick that up. So there's a lot of content, and it's amazing. I just created the first-time home sellers guide because the industry everywhere is first-time home buyers, but I don't see the first-time home sellers. So there's another example of doing things that no one else is doing, or if next to no one's doing it the very best.
Well, and that's fantastic. And I never heard of first-time home seller, but that is so important, how to prepare your house for sale, what to do with
what do we, chop liver? Right.
Right. It's all about buyers now.
Right, yeah. What
it
is
has to
this?
be about sellers. So here you have, and I am familiar with that. I took the pledge, what that means for my client. It's Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, and this is really great pledge from the real estate professionals.
Well, basically, this concept was when I was Senior Vice President of Research and Development, as I'm going through my journey with different brands and brokerages, honoring all of them and having people understand there's certain things that are proprietary to each. People can use ideas, but they've got to change language, names, nomenclature. But I asked myself this question about 5 years ago. Why is it that there's only one oath within the real estate industry, and that's from the National Association of Realtors, which is very important because I don't think the industry would have survived without the National Association of Realtors. And yet, in my research, I came across the fact that over 300 different companies and entities have people take pledges and oaths. Not just the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts. The physicians take a Hippocratic oath, although it's changed a little bit since ancient times. So I said, wait a minute, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services has 4 mantras: trust, integrity, stability, and longevity. I think those are so aspirational and admirable that I think that people would be proud to take a pledge on behalf of their loyalty to the company. And I think the consumer gets comfort when they see that people are willing to defer to things bigger than themselves. So I created the Forever Agent Pledge. Between 15 and 20,000 people took this. And I encourage other companies to consider. Take your mission statement. Take what you believe in. Have people pledge to it. Have people take an oath. It's honorable. So that's that idea.
And I admire that. And actually, you are so correct. Berkshire Hathaway Home Services real estate professionals, they really enjoy, they cherish, they have it on their walls, they have their photos taken. I saw you at so many events where people will just get up and start clapping, and they strongly believe in it. So yes, thank you for creating that. I would like to move to realtor.com. So here you have, don't say anything good about realtor.com. And it took me a while to even understand what you're trying to say. Don't say anything good about realtor.com. How could you say that?
Well, if anybody watching this interview would ever have any doubt that I owe my career to unconventional thinking, this should dispel that notion, okay? Because I don't believe that any CEO or any president of any company in history ever was on the front cover of a magazine telling people not to say anything good about the company they led. But there's a reason behind this. There's a reason why I had to go to this degree. When I first took over Realtor.com, it was very contentious. A lot of the 840 MLSs resented the fact that their information was being taken and aggregated. A lot of the top real estate brokers were upset because they thought that Realtor.com evened the playing field. A lot of top producers resented Realtor.com because they thought they were subsidizing the site for the lower producing agents who didn't have to pay anything to have a basic listing. So there was a crossfire of people who had deep resentment to realtor.com. Therefore, when I first took on that position and I would go and do rallies, Lucy, people, you wouldn't because you're too kind-hearted, but people used to actually heckle me. It was so controversial. I've been controversial ever since. Because I stood up and I fought for a website that promoted every listing for free, that elevated the perception of the public to the industry, I'm a consumerist, okay? So when I used to do rallies and people would boo and heckle, afterwards they'd come up to me and they'd say, Mr. Dalton, I love realtor.com, but I knew why they wouldn't say it. I'd say, well, why wouldn't you say it? Why wouldn't you speak out? Well, because I don't want my competition to use it like I am. And I said, I understand that. My sister has said, Alan, I don't even like to give the lease to my babysitters, to my best friends. Somebody fishing is going to say they're not biting here. Okay, I understand that. So because that was so prominent, I created an article. This is the front page of Riz Media, John Featherston magazine. And I had a list here, all the things that you should say that are negative about us. Because Realtor.com does not generate any leads. Realtor.com is not local. Realtor.com is too costly. Realtor.com's website is a competitor to our company website. We have a great website, and that's all we really need. I don't seem to cut back on my newspaper advertising, even though it's hurting my bottom line. There's no difference between paying a referral to another portal or having to pay for advertising on Realtor. I put every single thing negative here. I said, you should take this, go back and make sure that no one else in your office ever uses Realtor.com. But then, here's what you say to get listings. Okay, then at night, here's how you should introduce it to home sellers. Here's how you should introduce it to buyers. So it was a classic example of reverse psychology. And this is not overstated. This magazine article on the chairs of everybody at every seminar quelled all of the haters, and no one ever again complained, because when they started to, people in the audience said, oh, I know what you're doing. You're saying negative, so we won't use it. I know. So I exposed this, and this is one for the ages. But again, if ever there was an example of contrarian thinking, again, to be deliberately redundant, it would be the CEO of a company saying, don't say anything good about our company. And this moved mountains, and it helped us turn around Realtor.com. Is that I think that the industry, if I can be this presumptuous to make such general major comments, I think the industry has to evolve from how it sees itself. When I first came into the real estate business, my license in Boston said real estate salesperson, because back then real estate was seen as a selling industry. There wasn't IDX, there wasn't marketing, people weren't doing videos. And so all of the training back then was on as if you're a salesperson. There was something called DISC. If somebody's a D, if they're an I, if they're an S, if they're a C. They had neurolinguistic. If somebody's audio, Lucy, how does this sound to you? And if you were visual, how does this look to you? And if you were tactile, how does this feel to you? So all of these power games were very prominent because everything was at the bottom of the funnel. It was interpersonal. Mm-hmm. It was how to sell somebody. But according to NAR research, 75% of homeowners only bring in one agent. So the challenge isn't how you're selling. The challenge is how you're marketing and using social media. That's why Matterport is so important. It's how you're marketing and using social media to get these appointments. Because most of the time, if you get up to bat, you're going to get that listing, okay? Most of the time, if you meet the buyer, they're going to be your buyer. So the industry has to evolve from the psychology of sales, okay? If they fold their arms, you fold your arm. If they lean forward, you lean forward. The industry has to evolve from the psychology of sales to the sociology of marketing. It's got to think macro. So that begins by first defining what are the unmet needs of the marketplace. The greatest definition of marketing is this. First determine the unmet needs of the market and then create goods and services to effectively respond to those needs. I did that. I drew a circle. What are the needs? People are moving up. I created a move-up system. People are downsizing. I created a downsizing system. People are moving with pets. I created that. People aren't planning. I created that. Okay. Should we move, improve, or relocate? I created that. We have to sell a home before we buy the next. I created that. That's macro, because it doesn't matter if somebody as a pet, whether they're a D, an I, or an SSC, they're all going to love that.
They're all going to love the pet, and you are offering value, again, coming back to value proposition, how you bring value to the table for the final consumer. It's not even because of the agent. You're not doing it for their agent. You are doing it for the final consumer, for the buyer and the seller.
Exactly. Well put, Lucy. But now staying with the macro level. We had 60 offices. 59, we had one in Manhattan. 59 were in New Jersey. What's the greatest unmet need in New Jersey? I asked myself. I know what it is. People in New Jersey criticized and made fun of by other people around the country. There's something called Jersey jokes, okay? And because of that, even though New Jersey's #1 in mental health, it's in the top 3 of affluence, okay? It's in the top 3 of educational scores. It's got the #1 rated golf course in the world, according to Golf Digest, Pine Valley. And it's where the first home of professional baseball. It has all of these wonderful things. The most people will say is this, oh, it does have some nice areas. So people are sick of that. So I created a slogan. People for years talk about macro. People for years, you've probably heard this. New York's a great place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. Ever hear that?
Yes, I could.
So I created a slogan, New Jersey's a great place to visit and an even greater place to live. We ordered 20,000 of these, and no less than 10 or 15,000 motorists all over the state were having this on their bumper sticker with our company's logo. This is macro thinking. Right. Companies don't think like this. The senator of New Jersey, Senator Lautenberg, contacted Joe Murphy and myself. We were in all the newspapers, and then 7 tourism bureaus. I had to sign a release so they could use this thing. So this is an example of thinking macro, not of the psychology of sales. And that's where the industry has to think more at the top of the funnel, having programs that people like real estate planning for everybody. And so this is one of my proudest accomplishments, is to honor the state. I also did a video. I did a video for one of the best companies in the country, Prominent Properties. Charlie Oppler, the former president of the National Association of Realtors, and his beloved son, Michael. I did a video with and for them called A Move to New Jersey, A Genius Decision. Now, why did I do that? I was driving down the Parkway, and I've done 63 different towns all over the country with my company years ago. But I was driving down the Parkway, and I saw a picture of Albert Einstein. And it occurred to me the 2 most notable geniuses in the history of America, Einstein and Edison, both voluntarily moved to New Jersey. So I created a video. I wrote a script and got it produced with my friend Ryan, A Move to New Jersey, A Genius Decision. So now that's a listing tool. That's a pre-marketing tool, because every single agent can market homes. Some will market towns. How many companies or agents are marketing the state? That's the biggest macro. That's the one thing everybody in the state, the only way you have access to people is through the concerns. There's only one thing that every homeowner in New Jersey has in common. They want their values to go up. This is the macro marketing, okay? Now, every homeowner wants that, and that's where Matterport comes in. And people have to understand, okay, just talking to your great CEO, RJ, who's an unbelievable leader, we were talking about this. The industry has to understand, you've gone from selling to marketing, because all the top agents focus more on marketing than selling. And now it's also merchandising. The way in which you make your properties look, that's an extension of who you are. And that has to be automated, okay? But that's a macro idea, because when people use Matterport, they're not thinking, well, are they a D? Are they an I? Those are parlor games. Mm-hmm. The industry's focused too much on how to make a listing presentation, as if we're going into combat, as opposed to how to meet needs of large swaths of commonality. Steve Jobs said it best. Most companies and people make the mistake of market segmentation. You should think of market desegmentation. Identify the largest swath of commonality, iPhone, McDonald's, and serve it. And that's where the industry can do a lot of better job. And that's where individual agents can do a lot better job. Julie Vanderbloe here in town is a great example. She's the #1 agent, I think, in the state of Connecticut. During COVID, do you know what she created, Lucy? The urban to suburban division.
Yes, and I heard her presentations. She was actually at NYC Expo. You were on my panel, and she was at that expo, and she was talking just exactly the urban to suburban.
That's a macro idea. It's not like urban to suburban if you're visual, if you're audio. No, while other people are into these parlor games, okay, playing, like pop psychologists and throwing around psychological terms, she has the divorce and separation division. Because what she understands is the consumer. The top agents understand it's macro, it's services, it's solutions. And Matterport fits into that description.
Alan, let's talk about your new book that was just published. And by the way, I love the whole artwork and how you are here. You are happy, you are positive, you are engaged, you are excited. Buyer agent, be aware. What a title. What a very creative title. Let's talk about that. How did you arrive to the decision to write this book, and what pushed you into it? And just few highlights.
Well, first of all, thank you for acknowledging this book and holding it up. I took that picture. I went over to Dublin to see a football game, Notre Dame against Navy, and I went to the Guinness factory, and I was in front of it, and a nice couple went by and said, "Would you like us to take your picture?" On my phone, so that's the picture
I love that.
they took. But also what every buyer agent must know and do in a post-disrupted real estate world. Mm-hmm. My favorite definition of disruption that I heard at a conference once is disruption takes place when something no longer makes sense. And so these lawsuits basically had the plaintiff's attorneys saying it doesn't make sense that almost everybody would pay a similar fee in certain states. And they also thought it doesn't make sense for buyer agents to receive that much compensation, and especially from the home seller. I disagree. I think buyer agents actually have more value, at least as much value, if not more value than a seller's agent, for this reason. First of all, a buyer agent, in my opinion, has to have more value when it comes to community knowledge. For example, if you were the number one realtor in the country and I airlifted you right now to Chicago and you had never been there, you could come to a home, you could go to a home and market a property, because you could talk about IDX, you could talk about Matterport, Matterport Travels, you could talk about open houses, you could talk about brochures, you could go pricing, you could get all the data. So you could function with no community knowledge for the most part. But if I came to you as a buyer, interested in 3 or 4 communities, you'd be lost, because a buyer agent has to have more knowledge of the community. Therefore, they have more value there. Who has to have more construction knowledge? I think a buyer agent, because a buyer agent may be looking on behalf of their buyer client 10, 20, 30 homes and have to know all of those properties. A seller agent only has to know that property of the seller. And not only that, with disclosure and inspections, they may not be that vigilant in terms of pointing out flaws. So the buyer agent has more value when it comes to new construction knowledge. Who provides greater service? By far and away the buyer agent, for this reason. Because service has to be extended from personal service to home-related services, okay? So the inspection reports, mortgage, title, insurance. And then the negotiating is a wash. And so the first thing that I wanted to do is make sure that every single buyer agent first identify and internalize their value. So in the book, there's over 320 pages. I did case studies. Crystal Clark is the number one real estate agent in the world for Berkshire. Julie Vanderbilt, I think, is number one in Connecticut, number 2 or 3. Andrew, one of the top teams, Andrew Undum, Julie Vanderbilt. Emmett Lafley, one of the most prominent brokers, forward-thinking. Maxwell Stephen dominates the Poconos. Teresa Plasher-Smith, head of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Kathy Rabin, a tour de force down in Charlotte. So these are case studies. Like, for example, Julie did over $150 million herself, not her team, $400 million. And half of that was with buyers. Crystal Clark did $250 million. Half of that were with buyers. So I believe in doing case studies. So there's their whole operation, because as the saying goes, success leaves footprints. But then there's every single thing that a buyer agent needs to do to secure business. New construction, how to get new construction buyers. How to use your CRM more effectively. How to use artificial intelligence. How to do buyer seminars. How to create, for example, in the book I talk about, and this is what we did at Laffey here, the guaranteed buyer representation plan. Because very few, again, what is no one else doing? Very few brokerages, if any, have a guaranteed buyer representation plan. Here's why. Because over the last several months before we hit August, most companies were focusing more on the policies and the forms than in their presentation of value and the form that they had to be in, okay? And so because of that, a lot of companies have done guides, but the buyer doesn't need much help. A lot of buyers know there's going to be inspection reports, there's open houses, they make an offer, there's a counter offer. That's not where the challenge is to the industry. The challenge of the industry is for buyer agents to be able to manifest and convey their value. And so I put together the 7 A's of buyer agent value. Let me go through very quickly how it works. First of all, it's a guarantee, but no one can guarantee results. This only guarantees what the buyer agent will do, okay? And it all has to be completely doable 100% of the time. In the same way that if you go to a hospital, Lucy, you'll see the patient's bill of rights. Does that guarantee you'll have a successful surgery? No. Does it guarantee how much you're going to pay? No. But there's certain things that the hospital guarantees. I believe that there's certain things a buyer agent needs to guarantee, and it can't be left to chance. So because I like alliteration, same letters following one another, there's 7 A's. Now, I suggest that the first thing a buyer agent do after explaining, I love to show you properties, Lucy, but according to the new governance, we can't look at homes together unless we agree to work together. That's why our companies put together the 7 A's of buyer agent value and our guaranteed buyer representation plan. First of all, Lucy, let me ask you this. What do you expect from your buyer agent? Now, time out. Why is that an important question? First of all, it's consultative. It's collaborative. It shows confidence and you're in control. Second of all, the buyer will never be able to go over all the things that you do. So after they go what they expect, well, it's the right home, we'll help you negotiate, you'll get back to us. Whatever they say, you can then say, Lucy, with all due respect, you're not expecting enough. We do a lot more than that. And that's why we have the 7 A's. And then you hand this to somebody. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I'm going to pick out a couple of A's here. The first one has to do with agency. Lucy, would you agree with me that it's very important that a buyer agent, as soon as possible, establish trust?
Of course.
Well, how do they establish it?
They they describe their value proposition. They're talking about what they're bringing to the table and how they're going to help you.
Okay. That's one way of looking at it. Another way is to understand this. It's even more important that they establish trust with the buyer because in most cases, they've never met the buyer before. The home seller, they may know, somebody may know them, they've been in the community together. Now, so they've got to establish trust because just because they're showing all they know doesn't mean you can trust. Could a stockbroker show you every single thing about the stock market, but they may not be trustworthy? Could a person sell you something, they know everything about the product? Could a mechanic know everything about a car, but you still may not trust them? So how do you establish trust? I thought a lot about that. Do you say, oh, by the way, you can trust me? Oh, you really can't? Seriously? No, you can't. So I built into this presentation that can be customized. You can do 1 minute of it, you can do all of it. If somebody's ready to sign your fee, off to the races. But you hand this to them and they go over it with you. First of all, agency. Agency means that you and I will be as one. The seller agent represents the seller. The buyer agent represents the buyer. Disclosed dual agent doesn't represent either but serves. We can talk about that later. But so that means that you and I will be as one. But I want to tell you, that's the ethics. But I want to give you my ethos. Because there's a difference, Lucy, between ethics and ethos. Ethics is what I must do. Ethos is what I should do. For example, I'm not going to ask you this afternoon about your financial circumstances, about your timetable, about whether you have a home to sell or not, or anything confidential until and unless you first ask me to represent you. Do you know why? Because if you don't ask me to represent you, and if I end up representing somebody else, that could actually be negotiated against you. So I just want you to know that. Do you understand that?
Yes.
The second thing I want to say about agency is this. The seller agent will use AI, will use language models like ChatGPT. Do you know why they'll use it? They'll use it to make the home look as valuable as possible. Because I represent the buyer, I use it to make the home look less valuable, to criticize it, why you might not want to buy it, why you might not want to move to the town. Now, keep in mind, no home is perfect and no town is perfect. And we don't want to sabotage ourselves, but I just want you to know that's how much I'll fully represent you. The next A is access. I'll give you great access, not only to every home on the market, but only 3% of the homes here in Fairfield County are on the market. Would you also want to have access to homes off the market if you see a neighborhood or street you're very interested in?
Of course I would.
Okay, then I commit that to my clients too. Arranging appointments would cover that. A prize value. Lucy, most buyer agents still do what is called a buyer CMA. That's when they show you an estimate of fair market value. That's not enough for my clients. I don't want you just to look to move for lifestyle reasons. I want you to also be thinking of your home as an investment. So because of that, I do a buyer MMA, a buyer merchandising market analysis. I'll show you what you can invest and we can project how much of a return you can get. Because I want you to not just look at these homes and we narrowed down the homes. I don't want you just thinking, I want you to think of how much of an investment, how much you could make on this home over the next 5 or 10 years. How does that sound?
That sounds perfect.
So then you go through all of it. We're not going to go through all of this,
Right.
but there's every single A here. And then the last one is my favorite A, is after the sale value. You see, Lucy, a lot of people in real estate, they say, my past clients. I don't have past clients. I want to be your client for the rest of your career, all the time you're in town here. And that's why I have my lifestyle planning guide. That's why I have my community home services directory. People call it a 5-year head start of moving into town here. Okay. So in the book, though, there's all these case studies. There's all the language. And then there's one other thing that I talk about. Okay. I talk about at the end of the book the importance for the industry, speaking in macro, we should lose forever the term listing agent. Because the plaintiff's attorney, it's clear, represents the plaintiff. The buyer attorney, it's clear, represents the buyer. The buyer agent represents the buyer. Who does the listing agent represent? I don't know. It doesn't say. Now, people know it's a seller, but it's subconscious. Now, do you think a buyer thinks either the listing agent or the buyer agent has more knowledge about the property? The listing agent.
Right.
So why wouldn't I want to go right to the listing agent? They seem so friendly. It's so non-oppositional. It's so welcoming. I'd be afraid to call the seller's agent. That's my adversary. It makes the industry look like the Confederation of Dunces that we don't even properly, because I think agents do more than just list the property. Now, I've been saying this for 40 or 50 years, like I've been saying don't say past clients for 40 years. And some get it and a lot will never get it. Okay, so I think we should always be saying who's the seller agent. But in the book, I talk about a different mindset. And these mindsets are reflected in all of these 300 pages. The industry has to change the way it promotes its value. For example, what percentage of real estate agents do you think, Lucy, have ever used the word comps?
Probably 90.
No, try 100%.
Okay.
At some time in their life, they use the word comps. Okay? You don't have to protect anybody. Let's be real here. Now, what percentage of homeowners do you think like hearing that their home is comparable to another or even competitive? Or let's take a look at some similar homes. They hate it. Here's what they always say. But they don't have 5 bedrooms. But they don't have a new kitchen. See, we're insulting people. What should somebody say instead? Lucy, let's take a look at properties which buyers will be evaluating at the same time they're evaluating your home. The next one, listing presentation. No one wants it. They all want a marketing proposal. How many agents have heard this from their coaches? Oh, you've got to treat your business like a business. That's poor advice. You should treat your business like a professional practice. You know why? Because a business has customers and a practice has clients. And the reason why 99% of hardworking, professional, wonderful realtors, when they want to retire, can't even sell their life's work is because they've been told for the last 30 years, treat your business like a business. Again, a business has customers, a practice has clients. But you have to have something like the real estate planning guide in planning to convert clients. How many agents have said this? Homes don't sell because of price. That's flawed thinking. If the only reason a home doesn't sell is because of price, that means the only reason a home does sell is because of price. It makes the agent seem like an overpaid appraiser. There's only one reason why a home doesn't sell. It's because of ineffective marketing, because price is part of marketing. That's why somebody can call, and if they didn't use Matterport, that makes an unbelievable difference. Because otherwise, their greatest skill is just getting price reductions. Because again, to be deliberately redundant, if the only reason a home doesn't sell is because of price, that means the only reason a home does sell is because of price. There's no value to the realtor, okay? The same thing is that you've heard this one. The market determines the price. If the market determines the price, what am I paying you for? A stockbroker, if they sell $1 million worth of stock, they get a commission of $50. What realtor would sell $1 million home for $50? No one. Well, why should they get more if the market determines the price? No, the market only influences the price. It doesn't determine it. Who determines it? The seller agent, the buyer agent, the lender, the appraiser, all working together, all the stakeholders. But when we simplify the business, the market determines the price. That was done for this reason. Real estate's the easiest business to get into, easiest profession, but it's the most difficult to be successful. That's why the great people in real estate are the greatest in the world in every measurement, okay? And to make it easy for everybody to get in, you can't have it that the market doesn't determine the price. You have to have the agent have as little value, little effect. When the market went down in 2008 and then crashed, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac was blamed, Bonnie Frank, Countrywide Mortgage, everybody was blamed except the real estate industry. Why? Because everybody knows the real estate industry has no influence. And so to keep the influence down, that's why people advertise. When you're ready to buy, sell a home, give me a call. Because they're not the reason people buy. And when the market determines the price, the realtor has no value. When the homes are sold because of price, the realtor has no value. Okay?
And I think you are leading it to the sphere of influence. So the sphere of influence and influence the sphere.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. I heard people talking about for years sphere of influence. I never heard anybody say, how do you influence your sphere? See, a sphere of influence, most people haven't thought, what does a sphere of influence actually mean, Lucy? A sphere is a cylinder shape where every object around the perimeter is equidistant to the center. That only exists if you have clients. If you don't have a database, you have a client base. See, I could have the biggest database in Connecticut. I could buy the voter registration rolls for the Republican and Democratic Party, and I could walk around town as proud as a peacock. But in a year, I might be a feather duster. Because unless I'm selling where people go to eat, where they go to the movies, there's no value. You've got to upgrade databases to client bases. You've got to upgrade a business to a practice. And you've got to not just have a sphere of influence, you've got to think of how you influence the sphere.
How you influence the sphere and how...
But everybody in the sphere has to have equal value. Otherwise, your whole career is like this. Oh, here's my pipeline. These are my onesies. These are my twosies. These are my hots. These are my colds. These are my warms. These are my lukewarms. These are my ones. These are my twos. Okay, because it's not set up in the right way. Okay, you know the other thing that I think has to change is that agents have to become more consumer centric. And I'll give you a great example. How many agents have ever been asked, well, what makes you different? Or what makes your company different? And they oftentimes try to answer that literally. We do this, we do that, we do this, not realizing that the homeowner doesn't want to hear that because they don't want to hear an agent brag because they don't think you're different. So why prove them wrong? Here's what I recommend. Ask me how I'm different.
Well, how are you different, Alan?
Lucy, thanks for asking. But Lucy, rather than focus how I'm different, my focus is always on what's different about your home. You see, I don't compete against other agents here in Fairfield County, but your home competes against other homes in the county. I actually cooperate with all the other realtors, but your home doesn't cooperate, it competes. So the way that I'm different and my company's customized home marketing system is different is how we're going to focus on what's different about your home. Now, if you want to press me what I'm different, yes, I'm in the top 1% of all realtors in the country, although I know that means nothing to you unless we get you the best results. But my focus, again, is on what's different about your home. Now, the next one here. Recruiting, retain. 99.9% of the industry, actually 100% when I did this many years ago, I wrote a book about this. They were actually using these two words all the time, recruit and retain. And it occurred to me, the only people who use the word recruiting as much as real estate companies would be the military. And the only people who use the word retention would be the prisons. God bless those souls. So I figured, wait a minute, we're better than that. I want my company to evolve from recruiting and retention to selection and development. But it's not just words, it's not just semantics. So I created a 200 guide to selection and development. The other thing is that prop tech is a big thing. So I have the URL Prop Touch. I'm always looking, okay, to see the yin yang. What is the other side of the coin? But the last thing I want to talk about that's very contemporaneous is this. How are real estate professionals going to show their value to buyers? And there's all scripts and stuff. I'm not going to get detailed. Just remember, fees are negotiable. I've said that my whole career. I made one mistake on a video once, quoting another agent with a vulgar response that I bleeped out. And I should just stick to what I say. I should never have quoted somebody. But anyway, let me just remind, fees are negotiable, always and always will be. But just because fees are negotiable doesn't mean that you have to use that word. See, the industry has a challenge right now, and I pointed this out in the video 3 months ago. The industry can either, when you're asked what's the fee, whatever the fee, I can say, my commission is this. I can say to you, Lucy, my fee is this. Or I can say to you, Lucy, my contingency fee is this. Now, in the last 40 years, I have never seen a listing agreement or a purchase sales contract that ever had the words contingency fee. Yet when I Google a real estate contingency fees, it says yes. Again, it makes the industry look like the Confederation of Dunces. How can we not use the most favorable representation, the most honest, the most transparent? Because if you're a buyer and you're asking me what your fee is, and if I say to you, Lucy, our fee is blank, this percent contingency fee, and I said, do you know what that means, a contingency fee? Let's role play. Do you know what that means, a contingency fee?
Well, I guess it's contingent to you performing certain duties?
No, it's not just that. For example, I can perform all of the duties, Lucy, but if you end up finding the home you love, but the seller doesn't agree to the terms, guess how much you'd pay me? Zero. That's a contingency fee. Let's say you find the home, you love it, you agree on the price, but you can't get a mortgage. Guess how much? I worked for you for 3 months. Guess how much you'd owe me? Zero. Guess what happens if your home doesn't pass inspection? What do you think happens? You pay me zero. Okay. Let's say that the seller agent is willing to pay a fee that's the same as you've committed to pay me as the buyer agent. Guess how much you pay me? Zero. That's why these are contingency fees. Now, I'm not saying that you have to go through all of that, but sometimes you might, because attorneys seem to be smarter. They call it a contingency fee. This is even a greater contingency fee, because in a legal contingency fee in a class action suit, the judge or the jury can render the recovery of the judgment. Here, so the plaintiffs don't even have full control. Here, the buyer has complete control. At any step along the way, if they're not satisfied, they don't have to pay anything if these contingencies aren't met. For whatever reason, the industry has never gone there. So again, the challenge is this. I've been saying this for months now. The industry, hello industry, you can either keep talking about my commission, my fee, or you can tell more of the truth. It's a contingency fee, which is in your best interest to do. In fact, someday I'd even like to see it in contracts. Just like there's contingency fees on mortgage and so forth and inspections, to say contingency fee. If you don't bet, you pay nothing. This you pay nothing. This you pay nothing. Look at all the millions of hard-working realtors who have slaved for weeks and months, sacrificed, expended money, took all their time, all their frustration, and received squat and never even got a thank you. You are underrepresenting your value, and you are not making the best case when it comes to having a compensatory story.
Well, thank you. That is such a passionate and dynamic answer, actually, and so true. And you are stressing on how hard the agent or the real estate professional is, and how they are very often undercompensated, but then blamed for, I spent so much money on commissions. So I think it was...
And not only that, there's a much higher ratio of homes selling than buyers end up buying from the buyer agent. That's why a lot of agents didn't want to work with buyers. But you have to separate things. Just because buyer clients weren't as valuable to agents as sellers were to the listing agent doesn't mean that they weren't as valuable to both clients. But the buyer agent has to sacrifice a lot of time. The economics are not as good for them. At the very least, you should tell the full story. Come on.
Let's talk about your personal life. You were involved in sports since you were a kid, and that taught you the discipline and actually the forward thinking. So how did you apply your knowledge in sports in your professional life when you talk to your agents, or in your personal life with your kids and your niece, your nephew?
Well, first of all, what I took from sports, and it's a cliche, is a propensity to put a high value on teamwork. I've always believed a few things. Number one, none of us are as smart as all of us. And every person in the world can do something that you can't do. I don't think I could accomplish anything by myself. Everything I've done in the career, for example, when I've written books, I always have a partner. Here's me and Andrew Undum, the great Andrew Undum, okay? Buyer agent, be aware. Look at all my contributors. When I was CEO of Realtor.com, I knew I broke the record for the most people on the front cover of Riz Media. I think there's 11 or 12 of us here. That was at my insistence. I was a CEO. I could do whatever I wanted. But I would feel really bad if I wasn't there with my whole team in terms of that. When I wrote this book, Creating Real Estate Connections, again with G. Dunstan, he was the president of CRS. You see all of the people. Oh, yes. And so I can't function without a team. And I brought that into real estate, and I've been able to, just think about it, I was able to traverse and navigate a number of different brands. How was I able to create, along with Century 21, their global marketing system? Because I worked very well with all of their teams. Coldwell Banker, Century 21, ERA, at Realtor.com. And so my whole focus is teamwork and honoring people. But there's a difference, though, between how I've approached real estate and teams. Like, for example, people have asked me over the years, Alan, will you coach me? I have never coached a real estate agent. I've been asked by thousands. Anybody who speaks is always asked. So I don't take that as something to be prideful of. It's just inevitable. But I've consulted with hundreds and thousands, and I've done it for free because I don't like to. No, I coach my kids. Two of my daughters were both All-American soccer players, 2 times each. They played in high school. They played Division I at Princeton and UPenn. I worked with my nephews and nieces. My niece, although I had very little to do with great Alex Dalton was All-American in lacrosse at Notre Dame. My niece was captain of Harvard lacrosse. My nephew, Dalton McAfee, was captain of West Point hockey. His father, my brother-in-law, Ken McAfee, was third in the Heisman at Notre Dame and 3-time All-American. His father played for the New York Giants. Ken played for the San Francisco Giants, San Francisco 49ers, rather. My grandson starts in lacrosse as the face-off player for Quinnipiac. My other granddaughter was 2-time All Ivy League the last 2 years. Now she starts for Notre Dame as a graduate student there. My daughter, who passed away, was a great track star. And my other grandkids, they're up and coming. So we've been blessed to have a family that is very, very into sports and scholastics. And as you know, I was drafted by the Boston Celtics, but they've all done so much better than me. And that's the joy of my life. So yes, sports has helped me a lot in business because it treats you to respect people, to honor people, and to marvel at what they can do that you can't do.
Alan, we've been talking about so many success stories, and you've been in Riz Media Hall of Fame. With everyone you know and you worked with, who would you put in the Hall of Fame from your colleagues and your contacts and your friends?
Well, let me just stay with the people that are still contemporaneous, they're still in the industry. I have 3 categories. First, the leaders. Number 1, without question, would be Gino Bafari. He was the number 1 agent in Northern California. He was the number 1, he was the president of the number 1 Century 21 company in the world. 9 of their 12 offices, I think, were number 1 in his brokerage. Then he started Intera, one of the top 10 companies in the world. Then he went on to become the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, CEO of Home Services, and then the chairman of Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. And so Gina would have to be there. Another would be Bill Ravis, right here in Connecticut. I've never met a more innovative broker. He introduced HomeLink. He's always been on the cutting edge. I've never met a smarter person in brokerage than Bill Ravis. Dave Linegar, I had the good fortune of meeting Dave Linegar. Dave Linegar changed this industry. He basically emancipated real estate agents and freed them to make higher splits, okay? Gary Keller, I've never met him, never known him, but he's been able to not only lead one of the greatest brokerages and brands in history, but he's also an accomplished author. And then with Barbara Corcoran. Barbara Corcoran is a crossover leader because she built a major brokerage in Manhattan, but she's also a celebrity. So she has shown that she transcends real estate. So those would be my 5 in terms of leaders. My 5 top agents, or my 4 or 5 top agents, would be Julie Vanderblue right here in Connecticut, Crystal Clark in Santa Barbara, Andrew Undum, Valerie Fitzgerald, okay, in California, and Craig Proctor when he was an agent. He was the #1 agent in the world for RE/MAX. The last category in my Hall of Fame, after 40 plus years of being everywhere, is that would be the coaches. I think the 5 coaches that have been invaluable, that have made more millionaires than anybody next to Warren Buffett, would be first Mike Ferry. Mike Ferry is the father of real estate coaching. He's the father of business planning. And he has been an incredible treasure to tens of thousands of agents. His son, Tom, has taken it to an even higher level because Tom acquired everything his father knew, and then he expanded it into social media, into technology. So Tom, I think, takes an even more holistic approach that's more encompassing, okay? But he's up there in Mount Rushmore. Brian Buffini, who basically brought in the importance of personal referrals and relationships into an industry that was just selling and prospecting, okay? He'd have to be up there. Debbie DeGroat, okay? Debbie DeGroat was a top agent when she was 18 or 19 and is more organized and ethical, and she is as organized, professional, and ethical as any person I've ever known in real estate. And then Craig Proctor. Craig Proctor was able to not only be the top agent, he was able to transfer that into methodology. See, there's people who play the piano by ear, Lucy, but they can't train others to play the piano by ear. That's model training. Look what I do. Then there's methodology training. And Craig is all about methods and systems that scale, and he as well has had an amazing impact on the industry. So those are my 5 coaches, those are my 4 agents, and those are my 5 leaders. Not that it means anything to any of them, but since you asked.
Well, thank you. Alan, thank you so much. It was incredible. I enjoyed every single second of it, and I'm sure that our audience will as well. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate the fact that you invited me to your beautiful home, and here we are in the living dining area of this traditional Connecticut home. So thank you so much, and it was a great pleasure.
And thank you for what you do for the industry through Matterport. And remember, Auto Matterport, your digital business.
You got it.
Okay,
Thanks.
good.
Cheers, everybody.